Hello everyone, I'm your colleague Tuqa, and my presentation is about translation techniques used in translating a smartphone user manual. As many smartphones are imported from overseas and the user manuals are written in English, the translation of a user manual is very important for the customers whose English is not their second language. Translation of a smartphone user manual requires the use of various techniques to ensure that the translated version is accurate and easy to understand. The process involves not only translating the text, but also adapting it to the target audience. The translator must be familiar with technical terms used in the manual and have a good understanding of the product to accurately convey its features and functions. The study aims to find translation techniques applied in the manual and study them. There are some translation techniques that a translator can usually employ. Different experts propose different techniques of translation. In this study, we only focus on some techniques proposed by Molina and Alper 2002 that the translator of our object of the study has used in translating the user manual. The first one is borrowing technique, which is the most used translation technique in this study, because translating electronic terms from source language into target language requires accuracy. Many electronic terms in English do not have any accurate equivalence in Arabic. The translator mainly used this technique to transfer the term as it is, because its equivalent is not available in the target language. Borrowing is used to incorporate new elements into the speaker's native language, which causes transfer and copying process of foreign words. Literal translation is directly translating the source language element into target language element, and it's also known as word-for-word translation. The translator mainly uses this technique because translator wants to keep each meaning of the words intact. This translation technique is preferred due to its simplicity. Calc translation technique is taking borrowed expression or word and imitates the structure of the language. Calc becomes the second most used translation technique in this technology user manual. The translator used this technique because it's almost similar to borrowing, but there is a change in target language structure. They are that the affected grammatical clause is connected to the sentence clause or verbs, such as the future tense in English is changed into present tense in the target language. Transposition is replacing one word with another without changing the meaning of the message. Molina and Alper 2002 say that transposition is the act of replacing and changing a structure rule of the sentence, which is changing the word or structure rules of the sentence without affecting the message. Translators use this technique to make some changes in grammatical rule of target language that cannot be translated from source language. Transposition technique is not completely relevant for a technical document, but translator used this technique to adjust the style in the target language to avoid awkwardness in translating some sentences. Equivalence is a translation technique that produces an equivalent text in the target language that has same similarities with the source language. The equivalence technique in this user manual was used to avoid misunderstanding in the part of target language readers. The translator tried to establish equivalence between both languages to help reader understand the meaning of the words they don't know. Equivalence means describing the same situation by different stylistic or structural means. Adaptation is a translation technique that replaces the cultural element of a source language into an equivalent words or phrases in the target language. In this research, the translator used this technique to transfer cultural words of the electronic product, which was difficult to understand into a casual text in the target language. This technique was not very productive because the adaptation word needs to be of equivalence to target language, and adaptation technique is not necessary, there is no equivalent. The basic goal of adaptation is to introduce the adapted text cultural elements such as weight, measures, or musical notation. Modulation is a translation technique that changes the point of view, focus, or cognitive category in the target language. The purpose of modulation used in this book was to highlight the word and change its point of view to make the sentence sound natural. Modulation can also mean of translating a word or sentence that is the opposite of source language to give a different point of view. Omission means not using the words that have no place in the target language. It also means concealing the word that does not have equivalence or they are not needed in the target language. Omit certain word that is not needed in the target language. The translator used this technique because the meaning in the source language was already conveyed in the target language. Some long sentences can distract reader with more explanation, which can be omitted by translator in target language. This study falls under the field of qualitative research in the form of descriptive study. The data for this research were qualitative data taken from a smartphone user manual. The data were collected from words, phrases, and sentences in the user manual. The data were collected by comparing English and Arabic versions of the user manual. Each sentence, phrase, and word were read to match with the type of translation used to translate from source language to target language. The translation techniques proposed by Molina and Alper 2002 as presented above were used as the checklist to categorize the data in this study. The objective of this research was to find out the translation techniques used in the smartphone user manual, which was translated into Arabic as the target language. The data were classified based on the translation techniques proposed by Molina and Alper 2002. Based on the results of data analysis, 9 translation techniques were found in the user manual. This table shows that many translation techniques were used in translating a technology user manual from English into Arabic. However, only 3 techniques were used frequently, totaling 78% of all techniques found. The rest were used less than 10%. As for borrowing, the researcher found 56 data. As for literal translation, the researcher found 34 data. As for calc, the researcher found 17 data. As for transposition, he found 9 data. As for equivalence, he found 8 data. As for adaptation, he found 7 data. As for modulation, he found 4 data. And the last one is omission, he found just only 2 data. In conclusion, translating a smartphone user manual requires the use of various techniques to ensure that the translated version is accurate and easy to understand. Techniques such as borrowing, literal translation, calc, transposition, equivalence, adaptation, modulation, and omission are all essential to producing a high-quality translated manual. By following such techniques, the translator can ensure that the target audience can easily understand and use the product, which ultimately leads to a better user experience. Thank you for listening.